The chair notes that Quorum is here, and we do the flag salute. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, 2.0 additions, revisions to the agenda. The IT contractor option 6.1, we actually won't be reviewing bids today, but I did want to update the court on a conversation I had with the PhD about that. So I'm going to leave it in place so we won't actually be reviewing bids. Any additions, revisions? Correspondence, public comment. Individuals wishing to address the county court may do so at this time and at other times throughout the meeting. Speakers are asked to raise your hand to be recognized by the chair, give name and address, and limit comments to 3 minutes. Any public comments? Okay. I also do not have anything under correspondence today, so we'll move to 4.0 consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
My second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, which consists of consider approval of March 6th work session minutes, consider approval of March 6th regular meeting minutes, consider appointment of Tena Ferguson to North Central Public Health District Board, consider approval of Condon Food Pantry request for release of budgeted funds, consider approval of RES right-of-way application, consider approval of Justice Court sureties undertaking, consider approval of Assessor's CAFA grant application, consider approval of Resolution 2019-03 related to the CAFA grant application, consider approval of Victims Advocates County grant application, consider approval of Transportation Department's 5310 grant application, consider approval of Transportation Department's SDF or STIF grant application. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. 5.1, Frontier Tena update. So it is sounding like we are going to have our next regular meeting for Frontier Tena next Monday at 10 a.m. in Morrow, assuming that Judge Bolskus can make that date work. So I don't have too much of an update other than to tell you that the Frontier 911 board had a meeting last week that was well attended in Condon, partially because of I think the letter that we received here during our last session regarding the 911 call center. The 911 board is exploring options for whether they need to look at moving the call center, and a big portion of what's driving that, I think, is some of the uncertainty around the Frontier Tena network and what's going to happen with that.
Do you think with that uncertainty, this would be a good time to make a huge change like that? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's necessarily going to pan out in the way that the sheriffs in particular, who are really the ones that I think are kind of driving this discussion, think that it would pan out. But I did want to sort of flag for you all that one of the things that I sort of threw out into the discussion was the idea of perhaps Frontier Tena dissolving and the counties retaking legal ownership of the assets, and then turning around and leasing those directly to the 911 center to oversee the maintenance, et cetera, of the system. So obviously I threw that out there as something that we should maybe consider, but I also wanted to raise it here as something that may need to be looked at if we kind of are deeming that Frontier Tena really is not going to be a viable way to manage the assets moving forward. What that would do too would allow us to reclaim ownership. So if the 911 center, for instance, if those partnerships change over time, because Jefferson County's in there now, They sort of indicated last week that they were actually shopping around and perhaps leaving our call center, perhaps going to Crook County. What I would want us to avoid is, for instance, dissolving Frontier Telenet, transferring the assets to Frontier 911, and then having a situation where membership changed that would put into question who owns those assets if Jefferson County were to leave. So it seems cleaner that we might consider having each of the counties reclaim their assets, not really transferring them, but leasing them to the 911 center just for 911 emergency communications, the same as they've been doing. And then it would be up to the 911 board then to figure out how they're going to fund the maintenance side of that. Which is partially what's driving this whole idea that maybe they would need to move then, because then do you need Wasco County to be buying in and helping to make it sustainable? I'm not sure that they're kind of leaping, I think, ahead like 10 or 12 steps beyond where we really need to be right now, which is what happens with the Frontier Telenet system and how are we going to manage that. And until that question is really resolved, I'm not sure that there's a case to be made for why it should be moved, really. So, but I wanted to kind of bring you up to speed. This is one of those weird places where you sit on a board and feel like you kind of have to be out in front of the board sometimes on like where we might want to be. But I at least wanted to kind of update you that I throw that out there. And that I would likely be pushing the Telenet board to start making some decisions on how they want to manage the system and whether it makes sense to manage it under that with one. So, any questions about that? It's a mess. It's a total mess. And of course, there's a lot of people, for good reason, showed up very concerned about moving in. So I did not get the sense, based on comments that were made, that there was wide support for moving it, and even amongst those that were sort of driving that conversation, they got a lot of pushback from the public that was in the room, and maybe backed down just a little bit about what they were proposing. So I don't want to scare the public as like this is something that the 911 board is going to do and it's going to leave tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. But the board did authorize sort of a little subcommittee to start looking into options without really defining what those options would be. So.
And that's a tactful way to approach it, to looking at options way, because while the ORSs do provide for a way to unravel an ORS intergovernmental entity, this one has a lot of intertwining parts, and it's something to dip your toe in carefully.
Yeah. So that's what I have for the Frontier Telenet update. I will let you know.
Judge Shore,
Uh-huh.
before you move on, may I ask a quick question?
Sure.
For the record, let's after 9/11 board meeting, the dollar figure of 253,000 was placed out there by Brenda Potter. And my question is, does that represent the dollar amount that is now in arrears, so to speak, by Frontier Telenet, or do I have that wrong?
So Brenda Potter, over in Wheeler County, provided, this is from Give shares the background, that she put together sort of a snapshot of what she thought the finances were going to look like for Frontier Telenet through the end of the fiscal year. And the sort of takeaway is that there's still going to be, even with Sherman County's loan and Wheeler County's loan, about $150,000 short of being able to, I think it was 153 maybe and change, of being short of meeting the bills that they're anticipating coming in over the final sort of quarter that we have left in the year. The 250 would anticipate paying back Sherman County's loan. So she sort of had two numbers. The 150 was what it would take to run the system for the next, until the end of June. And then it was anticipated that Sherman County would be paid back on schedule, which is at the end of the fiscal year. So the total need would be just over $250,000 to meet those needs. So, and that was my understanding. But looking into the numbers, I'm a little unclear about where some of those numbers are coming from because they seemed, based on the first 8 months, the last 4 months seemed a little bit inflated, and so I'm going to be asking for clarification from Judge Morley next week on what is this line item actually representing. There was some consultant line items that were considerably higher than they would be if you were just paying Jeannie. So I'm not sure if that's when Deason's invoices finally showing up or what's happening. And we didn't really have time to get into those details since it was a 911 board that it was being presented out rather than a telenet board meeting. But that is my understanding, Les, is that they are still in need of funds in order to be able to complete the fiscal year.
Can I ask one other question? I should have said that. And maybe Ruben can answer this a little better, but there was also a reference at the 9/11 board meeting by, I believe, the sheriff, the chair of the event clerk. The words were mysterious attorney's fees. And the reason I bring that up is that I, as an interested person, asked what the dollar amounts have actually been for the telecom attorneys' work on behalf of the telenet board, that being Jim Deason. And I've yet to receive any type of response, and I understand that's the situation with you and with others of the guys, other than perhaps a recent attempt by the Condon city recorder to find out. And have you heard of any information, or is council aware of what those costs are at this point? Well, I bring that up just mostly to put it on the record, but I think it's really important that the actual members of the Frontier Telenet board at this point, are not willing, it seems, to disclose that dollar figure, and I really believe that needs to be part of the public domain at this point. Okay, thank you.
Any questions on what you're telling it?
No, I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good. So moving on to 5.2 batch plant update. We heard back from the Port of Arlington, and they are not interested in having the batch plant transferred to them. So we obviously are still under our month-to-month lease. So I'm kind of thinking, unless you guys think otherwise, that we stick with the lease for now, and then once that lease is terminated, that we would go through the process of surplusing it.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it's not so much that the port isn't flat out uninterested, it's just that as presented, they don't want to take on something that needs a bunch of work.
So you don't have to read them.
To repair
So
it.
it's not that it's out of the question, it's just that they're not prepared with the proposal to deal with it.
Okay, moving on, 5.3, review quotes and select valve machine replacement. So Ellen put together a briefing for us, went out for 3 bids per our procurement requirements. And it's really sounding, just from reviewing this, and her recommendations, that the election systems and software bid is the one that she prefers. Both based on the price and also that the ballot machine itself probably fits the size of our county a little bit better.
And I think the maintenance contract too was
A little bit more in alignment with what she thought was appropriate. And I would anticipate that we would likely take this out of the SIP discretionary.
okay.
Because there wasn't a line item in the last court did not, I don't think, budget for this under Ellen's.
No,
Budget.
because it was thinking about in the last one.
Yeah.
That it was becoming a big issue instead of a small issue.
So,
Your thoughts? Yeah, I thought she had a good recommendation.
okay.
And the SIP discretionary sounds appropriate.
Okay.
So I move to select the DS 450 from ES&S ballot machine for a total purchase price of $52,831.04 with annual warranties in the amount of $4,305. Funds to be taken from the SIP discretionary line item.
I'll second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to select the DS 450 from ES&S, which is Election Systems and Software ballot machine for a total purchase price of $52,831.04 with annual warranties in the amount of $4,305. Funds to be taken from the SIP discretionary line item. Is there further discussion?
So, Judge, I would just add that a clarification that in future years, if there's additional warranty payments, that those would come out of the clerk's line item.
So said.
So moved. So we have an amended motion, I guess, to move to select the DS 450 from Election Systems and Software ballot machine for the total purchase price of $52,831.04. The annual warranties in the amount of $4,305. For the initial purchase funds to be taken out of the SIP discretionary with the annual warranties coming out of the clerk's budget line item moving forward. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. 5.4, consider part of Arlington release of funds request. So, I think Sandy explained it pretty well in the briefing. Basically, the invoice that we received for $490 for the printing of the study puts us over the $17,000 that the court originally granted for phase 1. So the request came in, and rather than just sign off on it, I thought it was appropriate for the court to review whether they wanted to pay it or pay a portion of it, or how you wanted to handle.
Do we have any knowledge of whether or not this is the final bill, or is there could be a couple more stragglers?
I am going to say, as far as the feasibility study goes, I did go to that feasibility presentation, and I also was at the court budget meeting for as long as I could be last week. And at this point, I think, as far as the feasibility study goes, this will end the costs for that portion of what they're doing. There was a little bit of confusion, court commission, of whether they were done with this irrigation fees or the whole project, or if they were just kind of on hold to see if the irrigation committee needed their assistance at time on something else. So I'm going to say this is probably the end of the feasibility. I would say it's the end of the feasibility study for us as far as costs.
So what are you guys thinking? You want to pay it? Are you thinking you want to pay up to the 17,000, or say that we're not going to pay it? It's still one above what was approved.
You have $2.43 left?
You can give them $2.43, or it's their $4.90, or
Not pay it at all, or pay the full amount?
well, I kind of deferred to you because you were a part of the first decision on the 17,000. Personally,
I guess I wouldn't have too much heartburn paying it, because, the $17,000 was the figure that they gave us. Originally, we did say 100,000.
we committed actually more to their project than the 17,000 originally.
Correct.
Anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
And if there is phase 2, there will be more.
And I think it'll be different. It won't be this particular project. It'll be something else. Be attorneys or water rights, or something different.
So is there a motion to approve the release of funds request from the Board of Arlington?
So,
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Port of Arlington release of funds request in the amount of $490 for printing for phase 1 of the feasibility study. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
So, Judge, just so I'm clear moving forward, the court is saying that this is the end of phase 1 and any additional requests need to be coming in as phase 2.
Right, yeah, that's my understanding too. Is that yours, Leslie?
I don't know. I don't really.
Yes.
Yes. I'm only sure.
That's what you just said, though, really. And he's just trying to qualify the difference between phase 1 and
That
phase
just
2.
phase 1 is complete, printed, and now
Yes.
phase 2, they would need to come back.
Thank you. I just haven't heard much about what phase 2 would be, so I'm just.
And I don't think any of us have.
No, not for sure.
If there even would be one.
Yeah.
And then just a second point of clarification, that the $100,000 that was allotted would need to be either asked for as a part of phase 2 prior to July 1st, and after that, it's no longer allotted to them. Is that correct?
I don't know that we put I'm not aware of a deadline. I guess that we stipulated.
The reason I bring this up is that when it was originally set aside for them, it was set outside from the previous year's budget. It's from the 17-18 budget, and driving that, Lord pushed it back a year, taking another year would be very tangled.
So I think maybe that's a question we should have with Nathan about what that would look like. And, I mean, they're,
In the budget process.
yeah,
If he's going to continue to keep budgeting for that year to year.
thinking maybe that can just be raised during the budget committee
Okay.
hearing. That's,
So,
just to get clarification on that. Because if it is being moved forward anyway, the budget committee is going to have to be part of that decision
it
making.
needs to be
So
line item in the new budget.
so we will get clarification
Thank
on the 3rd. Okay, 5.5 ODOT noxious weed control IGA update.
Can I jump in and ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Did we make any attempt to see if we could maybe get, move up the waste management quarterly report time?
We have not, mostly because it works better for them to hit the Arlington meetings, which we've been holding as the last meeting of the quarter, and so I have not reached them at all.
Right, no, I was just wondering if we
Instead of having
coming earlier.
6.3.
Oh, time to date?
Time to date, yeah.
No, I have not.
Do you have his phone?
Would you
number?
like me to?
I mean, I'm thinking.
I have his office number.
We're at 11:23 right now. I'm thinking we're gonna be through this agenda in about like 20 minutes.
I'm just asking if that's possible to check with them, because it would help me with my scheduling conflict this afternoon.
It's not gonna be anything new.
And I guess I could, if I could,
You could miss it.
I could leave you guys with a couple questions.
We
I
still
already
have a quorum, so yeah, if you need to step out.
Okay.
Thank you.
But we could check and maybe give him a call and see if he can come sooner, you know, who knows, he's playing solitaire in his office.
Okay. 5.5 ODOT noxious weed control IGA update. Ruben.
Okay, so, we got the initial contract proposal from ODOT, and I had just a few changes that I wanted to make to it. One was to clear up some inconsistent language as to whether the contract can exceed 50,000 in a given year or 150,000 overall, or whether it can't. Because one of the initial statements in the contract implied that it could, and then all the subsequent statements that referenced the dollar amount flat out said that it could. So I sent the clarification of that, and I sent a request that we add the stockpiles, the gravel stockpiles, so that they would be sprayed, so that we wouldn't be spreading these around while we're doing our gravel. Well, so ODOT sent back what would be referred to as a red line, a Word document that appeared to fix some of the issues. But the thing is it really wasn't a red line. They made it look like a red line to fix some of the issues and then completely changed the document. It was, it's a tactic that it's not very much appreciated by me, and I'm sure the court doesn't appreciate such a tactic being employed.
No.
So when I discovered that, I mean, and let me go back, and they even changed stuff in the ADA compliance section. I mean, so we're talking about a complete rewrite that they tried to hide as a few red line changes. So my, excuse me, my initial thought was not to recommend approval of the contract just based on this negotiation tactic of ODOT. In following up on that initial thought, I spoke to Don Farrar, and he's gone over the agreement and is indicating that he can work within the confines of it, that he's going to be able to make it work, and that the funds are an important addition to his department. So my initial recommendation that we not approve the contract is now, with assurances from Don, gone to a reluctant acceptance. But I don't like it.
You just don't like their tactics.
Well, and I also don't like that. I thought it was very reasonable to add the stockpile.
I don't understand why they.
Do they have a reason why they pushed back on that?
They said that it might create an unfunded liability, which is, I don't know if maybe they don't know what, they think I'm stupid, or they don't know what they're doing, or whatnot, but unfunded liabilities come from the legislature. Here we have a contract and agreement and meeting in fines. I don't see how it would create such a thing, but that's what they said.
Okay.
And so they're they just would not do it.
That doesn't appear to be a deal killer
What was
for
that?
you. The not spraying of the stockpiles isn't a,
Well, it will become an issue for them, but it won't come for me, because if they're on private land, we can just go in and enforce the weed law on them
got
if
it.
we need to. If it's on lease land or federal land, that's a different ballgame, but usually the feds will work with us, and so one of our highways is federal anyway. So that covers that highway. So for the most part, their stockpiles are going to be, the two main stockpiles they have in Gilliam County are probably Arlington, ODOT, and Condon, ODOT. And that's not a very good place to have all your weeds if you have public there at all. So I think they'll understand that they need to clean that up as well. And they do have a sprayer of their own,
So they could maybe do it.
so they could do that on their own. So we'll just make sure we don't exceed the 50,000 and let them work through the rest.
That's good. So, based on that, is there a motion to approve the ODOT noxious weed control IGA?
I move we approve the ODOT noxious weed control IGA.
A second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the ODOT noxious weed control IGA. Is there further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I moved on.
Motion carries.
Done and
Richard doesn't have that. I don't know that I do, but I can get one from
doing the rest.
Okay, 5.6, and probably 5.7, these will kind of be connected a little bit in our discussion today, which is review solicited legal counsel proposals and telecom attorney search update. You may have noticed that the conversation has shifted a bit from obtaining alternate counsel for the 2006 IGA sort of issue with the court to more of a question of general counsel. So I will turn this over
Okay,
to
correct.
you, just briefly, and tell us the update on
Okay.
your status.
Okay, well, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, and
Okay.
then we'll go into the next,
So-
sort of next steps.
It just seems like the county with the new court is moving into a phase where they're going to be restructuring a lot of things. And in doing so, I see that on the horizon that can create some conflict situations with the other entities that are there. Because the county is sort of the umbrella organization of the region, it just made sense that I step back from representing the county. And that way, as long as you're doing an attorney search anyway, you can undertake a general counsel. I have really enjoyed working with you. I'm not going to leave you in a lurch. I will see you through this transition. It just seems like with things that could be coming up, that it's the logical thing to do. To make sure that everyone in the county is adequately represented and great conflicts.
We're sad,
I'm sad.
but we're good to continue to work with you to other entities.
Correct.
We won't come and stop seeing.
No, we won't. We won't. I'll bug you all the time. Yeah.
So with that, we have received two proposals when we were searching for alternate counsel. One came in from Spear Hoyt's local government law group in Eugene, and the second one came in from Bryant, Loveland, and Jarvis out of Bend. After Ruben and I spoke last week, is that when we had that discussion? Ruben gave me a heads up that this is what he was thinking, so I went back to those two that had submitted proposals and just asked if they would be interested in being considered as general counsel. Bryant, Loveland, and Jarvis said absolutely, they were 100% on board. Local government law group had some concerns only because they're based in Eugene, and I think they were concerned if the expectation was that they're here for our regular court meetings and things like that. They weren't sure if they could meet that need, if that's what we were thinking. So they were willing to do it based on sort of a description that I gave them as the general kind of workload. But the thing that I think they were a little bit concerned about is just that expectation of them being a person. So I guess the question I have for the court is, given that this is now a general counsel search rather than an alternate, would you like me to go back out and sort of cast a wider net, or do you feel comfortable with the proposals that were provided?
I personally am comfortable and pleased with the Bryant, Lovely, and Jarvis proposal, and if they're willing to be our general counsel. I don't know that if we go back out, we're going to find any more businesses that are going to be interested in them.
And where this connects to the telecom attorney search, I'll just kind of put them together, is that I'm having a heck of a time finding a telecom attorney in the state that isn't already conflicted out of helping us. The local government law group does have a telecom attorney on staff. And so what I talked to Ross, who's the point there, is maybe the idea that we would still potentially go with Bryant, Loveland, and Jarvis for the general counsel, but that we might be going back and talking to them about just the telecom counsel side. Because so far, I've talked to, I think, 4 or 5 attorneys, or 4 or 5 firms that have telecom attorneys on staff. It's hard to even find a firm that has telecom attorneys in the state, and they've all been conflicted with the city, inland development, Columbia Basin. They're all conflicted out right now. So I'm maybe encouraging the court to also take a look at the backgrounds of the law, or the telecom attorneys that were in the local government law group, and see if that's something that we may want to pursue a discussion with them about, just hiring them for just the telecom piece, so that we've got counsel, because it's been very difficult to find a telecom attorney
Well, and that would
can
be
practice here.
Because that's only going to be on a part-time basis anyway, it would be more like the proposal that they gave us.
More of a project base.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they would be assisting with, once the fiber line is completed, if we're looking to sublease those, they would be the ones that are helping us create those documents that are very sort of a specialized kind of area of the lot. And if there's, if we do move down the path of dissolving frontier telenet, or there's some questions about what we need to be doing to protect those assets, then those attorneys would then be sort of our go-to on just that piece of the telecom side. So in terms of general counsel, are we prepared to move forward today in accepting one of these proposals? Or what are you thinking, Elizabeth?
I had a couple thoughts. I noticed that when I was reading through their proposal, that they, are counsel for the city of Redmond, the Redmond Parks and Rec District, the school district. So I think that's, like what we were talking before with Ribbon, I mean, that happens. And there's probably a lot of them in our state that have the potential for conflict. All over. The other thing I noticed was that they said they would consider a reduced travel rate, and I would like them to consider it.
The other thing I should note too is that the actual letters that they sent would not be prepared because they were written under the idea that they would be the sort of alternate, sort of more limited scope. So they did ask, they would like to go back and look at those and just make sure that those would cover. So what I'm saying is if we decided to move forward with them today, I think the next step would be me going back to them and saying, this needs to be obviously modified to fit general counsel, and by the way, can we talk about the travel fee?
There you go. Good.
And just for perspective, I've been charging half plus mileage for travel.
Yeah, thanks.
And and actually
That's another reason we're sad.
I'm rather surprised at the rates. I do find them very competitive.
And I would just throw out to also consider land use and planning, because those are major legal needs that we have every year. Last year, we had some really complicated land use things that came through. And so that should be part of the consideration.
Any other questions, thoughts? Are we ready to move forward today, do you think? Or do you want us back on?
Can we go ahead and move to accept them as our general counsel, or do we need to wait and get their new proposal?
I think we could probably have a motion to, let's see how defined the proposal was.
We could do a motion to negotiate further with them regarding the travel time and other matters.
Become general counsel as opposed to.
Yes, because there's and select them, and then at the next meeting, I'm sure then they'll have provided a contract to work under, or then they'll have all the final terms.
Okay. So it would be, I'll make the motion.
Super.
So I would move to accept the proposal from Brian Loveland and Jarvis out of Bend for general counsel services pending
municipal and county law. And I'm not quite sure you've perhaps been made aware of them or actually looked at the possibilities out there. So I'm not asking you to delay the motion in terms of putting on the table, negotiating with this particular firm, but I really think maybe it might be a better situation if you were to think about RFPing for it rather than just looking for 3 quotes and seeing what response you get. I guess that's a little dependent on how quickly Ruben is having to leave. But I know of at least one firm in the Dalles that might be an option for you. And there's another firm in Pendleton. And I'm just thinking that I'm aware of the one you're talking about. I mean, geez, that is produced some historic representation at the state level. But I'm not trying to throw a wrench in the works here, but I really think it might be in your best interest to look at a broader circle of possibilities than just the 2 firms that you've come to look at this point.
Thank you.
Well, I was a part of this search, so I don't know how difficult it was.
It was me kind of looking at, who's a municipal attorney or municipal firm that's within, a reasonable amount. The Eugene one popped up because they represent a lot of, I think, cities. And one of the things that appealed to me when I was looking through there is the number of attorneys that specialize in different things that I thought might be beneficial. So, but I'm happy if we feel like we want to go out broader, because this really was an alternate search initially. And so when I was talking to folks, I really was saying, this is to address the specific issue that we have with one entity. So, we could go through a longer process if folks we wanted to. Thoughts?
Well, firms in Pendleton and Dalles may have the same types of conflict that we're currently having. Bend was, to me, was like not too far, but not too close. But I don't know that we're in a huge time crunch, are we?
I'm not, and other than the Willow Creek thing, it's not a huge kind of crunch.
This could be a very long relationship we have with whoever we choose. What do you think?
It's worth considering.
Second, go ahead.
You can also, just I'm throwing this out here, I'm not recommending it, but you could also go with the then attorney for the Willow Creek for now and put out the RFP as well. And let you try it a little before you buy it.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's a good sign. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Judge, may I add just a quick comment? And that is that I really would second what Sandy mentioned in terms of the county's needs looking broadly, because land use and planning is going to be certainly
It's a big deal. So it sounds like there may be consensus in kind of doing a broader search. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, so I will, for the record, rescind my motion. So in terms of direction, would you like me, do we want to make the decision on the IGA, getting counsel for just the Willow Creek IGA, or do you want me just to, because the thing is the Willow Creek thing, we are really driving that. So if we wanted to wait until we have counsel in place, there's nothing I would say that it could be done after counsel is.
And it's been 13 years, so another 3 months probably wouldn't make much difference.
Yeah.
But I kind of also like the idea of trying it out a little bit.
Okay, so,
Well, if we could get our costs lower too, travel wise and availability, I think you're right, is if we get someone closer, their availability would be greater than someone from there.
It would be good for for us to have a scope of work and priority areas that we need to have covered by this. Because like you said, this is a very important role for the county and potentially a long-term relationship. So I'll make sure we got somebody that fits us the best.
So, okay. Would we like to try out Brian Loveland, Gervais? Would you like me to go out for a broader legal counsel thing and just whoever we accept will then handle the Port of Arlington, IGA, or, well, those are really our two options. Those are our two options. Which would you prefer? Okay, Sherry, you're up first.
Sherry does, yeah, but, at this point, I think we can just go ahead and wait. And it's a different general counsel and go from there.
Okay, so we will plan then on putting out an RFP and going through that advertise.
So are we talking about, right, so you're talking full-blown process,
I
rather than
think
just trying to solicit quotes
Right.
based
Well,
on our new, what we're looking for?
Because the suggestion from the audience is that it be a full, because that's how we arrived at these quotes, was me going out to 3.
Right.
So if we want a wider one, I mean, it's one thing to say, we'd like more in the mix, so could you talk to a few more people? That's the question, I guess. Do you want me just to talk to a few more people and have more people in the mix? Or would you like it to be broadly advertised and sort of go through the traditional RFP process?
I guess we can.
The RFP process?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay, I think so.
I was just thinking about the
Money,
money.
Okay,
But yeah,
so,
so we gotta do.
Well, if we can get somebody that's closer and our travel expenses aren't as much.
yeah, I think by,
Because we've got to get somewhere closer to what moving's been costing, so that's going to be really difficult.
okay, so,
So if I can ask, what kind of timeline are you guys thinking? Are we looking for something in the next month, next 2 months, starting July 1? What do you guys?
What do you think, Ruben? How long do you think?
Let's
Prolong your agony?
Yeah, well, it's not like, no, but let's get it out there and,
Yeah.
I think we need to get it going. So I would think
We dragged it out too long.
if we could maybe, just off the top of my head, if we could, these normally advertise for about a month, so that would,
no,
Be
I
out
don't
2
think we need
weeks.
to go a month. Yeah, I would even advertise it maybe just twice and, yeah, 2 consecutive. I don't know where you even want to advertise it.
When we, just this is a question that just popped in my head because I can't remember. When we advertise it, when we do the full blown and put it out, do we also contact people?
Yes, you can.
yeah, I would probably go back to the 2 firms that had the interest in the first place and ask that we could resubmit it under a general counsel, since
Okay.
they had it. But then additional folks obviously would be in that mix as well. So I'm kind of thinking in terms of timeframe, if we can have our RFP out, we're looking at sometime in early April. That's doable. And then back and maybe approve the first meeting of May timeframe.
Sounds
I
good.
think that works.
Is that doable?
Then it's time to get something together.
Yeah. Give us a few weeks to get it out there, a few weeks to advertise it, and then we probably miss the second April meeting, so maybe the first in May. And then in terms of the telecom attorney search, do you want me to pursue the conversation with the local government law group and that specific attorney?
I think that's the best. thing to
Okay.
do, yes.
So, because again, the proposal wasn't based on that, so I'm gonna go back to the person who actually handles the telecom side and make sure that that's within her scope. And if so, then I'll ask her to put together something to come back to the court, if that works.
Yeah, because if it's been that difficult to find someone, then we need to grab whoever.
Yeah, I found somebody who wasn't conflicted on the telecom side, but they do telecom and energy, and they represent Columbia Basin on the energy side. So So, so they were conflicted out. So, okay, good. Got direction. We'll move into new business 6.1. Consider IT contractor options. We actually, because of everything that's going on with the grants coming in and all of that, don't have the bids to review today. So I'm hoping that those will be on next agenda. But I did want to just update you that I did have a conversation with Penny at the ESD yesterday afternoon, and just let her know that we of course appreciate the partnership with the ESD, everything they've done for us, but that it just felt like maybe our IT services were becoming more advanced than what was really reasonable to expect. One of the things, the feedback that I got during that is that when they built all of our systems, because they were all in partnership, I think through French and Telenet, these systems are much more intertwined than just jumping off and going to a new IT person. The servers are all combined in weird ways that could potentially harm the other counties if it's not transitioned carefully. So I'm just flagging this because I think what would likely need to happen is that the ESD would likely need to remain on contract with us even possibly beyond this fiscal year in order to be able to hand off to new contractors as they're coming in, because ESD systems are all intertwined. Sherman and Wheeler County systems are all intertwined, and so if we get somebody in there that's not familiar with the system and brings down a piece thinking it's simple, we could potentially affect the other partners that were all intertwined in the system. They sort of described it as like kind of a conjoined twin that we are trying to separate. So anyway. There were words like scorched earth and all kinds of stuff that made me very nervous, and so I'm just, yeah, so I'm just flagging it that it's likely that even as we are transitioning to a new IT person, that the ESD, there's going to be some overlap in order to make sure that we're not bringing down systems that we didn't obviously want to bring down. So,
Okay.
but Kelly will have more for this for the next session. 6.2 is the public hearing, which will wait until 1:05. The waste management quarterly report will come as soon as it comes.
I called him, left a message, didn't speak to him.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we'll deal with it.
So with that, I think let's go to 7.0 and go ahead and do our court member reports. Okay, thank you. Leslie, anything on?
Yes, I still don't have the book. Do you know what I thought about that? I used it on the shopping list.
I'm trying to think what I did. I did go to a North Central Public Health District meeting. They will be excited that we've appointed a member from our county. They'll be glad to hear that. I told them that it's in the works, but we're going over the audit right now. We're starting the budget process. So we were just handling a couple of those big things. They like to be vice chair.
Way to go.
So pretty exciting.
Yeah, you're big time.
That was about all that happened there. I had a question about, okay, so I was contacted about the road committee. Oh, but I'm gonna wait till he comes back because I have questions for him. Another thing that I stumbled on is I was reading the minutes from, this is just no questions for me basically. I was reading the minutes from the all-staff meeting, and something was said about commenting, and Sandy commented on the quorum regulations and also applied to email, therefore please refrain from emailing all 3 county court members at a time. And I need some clarification on that because that's something that has been, people do all the time. I asked the city administrator, do you send email out to your whole council? Yes. That's something that people use a lot, the ability just to, and I try to be real careful and not respond most of, a lot of the time.
Right.
But is there really a problem with, and I'm thinking that something maybe came up at AOC? Is that really the
What
way
they
it's going now?
said was, if you blind copy, and then so that when you reply, you don't reply all, then you're not having a conversation. Does that sound right?
Copies that make me feel like there's, I don't know.
So you're trying to hide something?
Yeah, I don't like that.
The key is that you can't be in deliberations regarding this topic that's coming before the board. So to email out information to all of you is fine, but what you can't have is any chatter going back and forth.
Between us.
That would be considered a deliberation regarding a topic. And you can't have what's called a serial meeting where neutral third party will contact one commissioner, get input, and then contact another and get input, and then contact Judge Farrar, get input, and come to a decision or get some deliberation of that. So you just have to be really careful that it's just a receiving of information only and not hitting replies to the other commissioners or judge and start the deliberation process.
So because when this came up, I just basically said to the staff, if you want to email us all simultaneously, just blind carbon copy the three of us simultaneously, and you can put in the header your court or whatever, so that we all know that we're all on it, but that if I reply to whoever sent us the email, that you guys can't see what I replied. And then...
But can't you do that anyway without just...
Yeah,
just reply?
Yeah, if you just reply, it's where it gets tricky is if one of us forgets that, or if there's multiple people and you want, say, some of the other electeds to see a response but not each other, and so you hit reply all because you want Chet or Nathan to see what somebody wrote, and it seemed a little cleaner to have folks.
Well, I'm just kind of new to the blind copy, so
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about all the other ways that it can be used.
Yeah.
The only way I don't want someone to see this, and so.
No.
Or I don't want the recipient to know that I'm sharing it with someone, so. That was pretty much my experience with blind copy.
Well, I didn't realize that DCC would reply to the people that were online. One really safe way to do it is reply, you can hit forward and then just plug in the specific email addresses you want it to go to.
Or eliminate those.
Yeah, the main thing is just make sure that you're not deliberating amongst yourselves.
Okay. I think the last thing I had was, okay, so the road committee, the process, and maybe you might know what we did, but the process on finding out who was interested, well, now I've been contacted by people that were interested and didn't see it in the paper. So I was curious, how many times do we put it in the paper, and are we posting that kind of things around both towns, at the little locations, post office, bank, those type of places?
Sandy would have to answer on the posting.
Posted 2 weeks in the Times Journal.
And then, Mac would probably know how many, do you remember?
I'd have to
how
look
many
at
times we
it.
run it? But I think we did run it a couple of different times.
But if that's the only place we're going to open that.
But and I'm just curious about that, because when I worked at the city, anything we put in the paper, it always went in the post office, bank, at least 3, and at City Hall, at least 3 locations, sometimes more. And I'm just wondering, are we doing that? Are we doing that too?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that. Obviously, they're all posted at the courthouse for sure, but I don't know what we're doing to make sure they're getting posted and
On the website.
Yeah, they're both on.
If you don't know, you want to look for that. You're probably not on the website. Scroll around.
Exactly.
Try to see what's going on.
Yeah, and I guess that would just be my recommendation, is just to make sure we're getting them out into both towns and at a few different locations. So people will know, because like I said, I'm getting some grief from some people that didn't see it, and probably would have been very good on the road committee, but they just missed it.
Has it been filled completely then?
Yes.
It has.
I think there's an opening coming up in a year.
Well, that's right, because the way they stagger
Depending on which one.
Pass that along?
Yeah, depending on which quadrant opens up the first year, they might be.
as we stagger the.
Okay.
Cool. Any other?
Nope, that's it.
Sure.
Well, I did attend the Court of Arlington meeting on Tuesday last week. I was only able to stay for the budget, first part of the budget process. but I did learn a lot, even just in that part of it. I would like to stay for the rest, but that was an evening meeting and it didn't work out. I also, the Condon School District Board Chair, Brian Johnson, had contacted me and had a conversation, and we met last Wednesday, and that was, I really appreciated, knowing that we were concerned about how the school districts were co-opting with their sports, and I felt bad because I felt that really I should have reached out to him, but we had a really good conversation and I have a better understanding. So I will be attending a Norcore meeting tomorrow in the Dalles. We have a 9:45 special meeting to address a short issue, and it will be in budget session. And I met with Judy Kennedy, and we just discussed broad topics of the port commission and then the road department. It was just a fact-finding thing for me. We talked about the industrial park and the batch plant. I also had a communication from Nanette Lawrence at Hardin Mills regarding, she had emailed Jeff Schott regarding the leaking roof and some deterioration of the concrete of the sidewalks around their building. And at this point, I don't believe Mr. Schott has replied to her. And so I guess that's something I need to find out is what is our role and why is Jeff Schott getting their first contact, and what are our expectations from him and his role for that type of maintenance. So that's something I need to do some research on.
Okay.
And that's it.
That's it. Okay, I have just two quick things. I think, just trying to remember everything I said I mentioned during full reports, but I had a conversation. I had a conversation with Michelle Gear earlier in the week, and I just want to flag this. I mean, I think we knew this was going to happen on grant requests, but so the school district was not anticipating in Condon asking for an operational grant. They felt like they had some money left over from previous, from the college grants that are previous, and they thought they could probably run the college program this coming year with what had been left over from previous years. But because we had sort of set the policy that we might not let people into the pool the second year, I went ahead and said, I don't know how the court's going to adjust it the next year, but you probably need to be in that funding pool. So I just wanted to note that for the record, because this had come up, that it's something that I think after this grant cycle goes through, my full intention was for us to revisit this and see what worked and what didn't and what needs to be modified. But I'm just kind of flagging for the record that I think that's something we might have to look at again, whether that is actually functioning the way it was. Because in this case, we were getting an extra grant request from the school district we wouldn't otherwise have gotten, but for this policy that we.
And that's something that we talked about.
Yeah, we did talk about that. So the challenge was they don't need it this year, but they, depending on what the state does with education funding, they may need support down the road. And I didn't want the school district to be locked out of being able to ask for that help just because they're doing okay this year. So anyway, I'm flagging it. I don't think we have to make a solution today, but as something that when we revisit what worked and what didn't, that we probably need to discuss that piece of it and see if we need to modify. The second thing is I had a conversation about railroad crossings for waste management.
That's in those too.
Yes. Can you remind me the rail company?
Waco.
So one of the things that they asked us to look at is, so they have been making an effort to try to clear the tracks as they're running, so that there's not a backup people are still going around the arms even after they do that. And obviously that's a
Federal offense.
it's, yeah, and a huge safety concern and all kinds of things. So, my understanding, and maybe when Alan's here, you can touch on this, is that Waste Management was gonna have flaggers there for a period of time to help try to keep that from happening. But Watco had suggested that it would be, since it's a county road, maybe in our interest to look at doing some dividers, right there, like they've got, so the flimsy, I don't know whether they're flimsy, but they're kind of they'll give a little bit.
They're breakaway.
Yeah.
The truck takes them in.
To just kind of have, so that to prevent people basically from coming out and going around the arms. So I wanted to flag that, something, and I wasn't sure because it's a county road, so technically that's you, Leslie, but it's also Waste Management and kind of shelter station related, and so I wasn't sure if one of you has an interest in digging into that or talking to Dewey about it. You would like Sandy and I to kind of manage that, exploring what that would look like to.
No, I was just, my first thought was that if the delays weren't so terribly long, I think that people would be maybe less inclined to be doing that. And that's one of the questions that I'm hoping that I'm not here for the waste management part, that I wrote out a few questions, but to find out what they are doing about that, because I've also heard mention of them possibly building a new road, which I'm thinking, well, that's not going to help all the rest of the county residents. That would only help employees, and they already have a road.
Not necessarily.
So,
What Dave Lowe indicated to me was that when there were long delays, the road would be employee only unless there was a long closure, and then it would be a flagged detour. But that was one of his thoughts. I don't know if that's something and these are all things that are on the agenda tomorrow, or this evening, for the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Okay.
that next week.
27.
I think it's next week.
Oh, okay. I guess I better not go tonight then.
So you got the evening off?
Yay. I didn't have anything next week.
So maybe the takeaway is to see what happens next week. I think it still might be worthwhile even to look into, even if there all are alternatives, whether it's worth putting something in place that's gonna, yeah.
So that my stumbling was, what was the wording you used? Create barriers?
So like so that you're separating the lanes, basically.
So that people can't go around. There's physical barriers, they can't cut across the lane, go around the arms. Because that was one of the things that Ben's Waco said, is they're actually, some of the delays are causing is they're choosing not to break the train, because when they do, people rush around before their arms even go up. And they don't want to see somebody get killed in there, say 30 seconds. So they're actually choosing, for safety reasons, to keep the train together and have.
It's less than 30 seconds, believe me. But one thing I witnessed, one of the last times I went out to work was the train was blocked, and it was on the last crossing right at the offices. And so there was a lineup for the truck route, and then there was a lineup for the county highway, and people had taken up both lanes. So when the arms came up, the train went by and the arms came up, they were facing the people on the other side. It was like, the lack of common sense is amazing. And they're still going around the arms, even if they have the full train. As soon as the train clears, they're going around the arms.
Exactly.
But one thing is they're late for work because they didn't plan correctly. One of the things that, as a manager, if you got caught by the train, that was you got your time.
Right.
And that's what we called it.
Train time.
Caught by train. Okay, so that's something that they need to work through themselves too for their employees, is that if you're If you were gonna be on time and you got caught behind the train, then you're not late. But that's a management issue, and there's a lot of those, so.
So that is all I had. It sounds like maybe after your meeting, maybe there may be some other ideas. I mean, I think it's kind of a multi-pronged approach to figuring out what's the solution.
I wonder if signage even there that said it's a federal offense.
You know, and one of the things that came up in the planning commission meeting on Tuesday night was that they were actually prosecuting someone who had just gone through there the other day.
That's good.
They're pressing federal charges.
That's good.
Because they're tired of
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
people risk their lives.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
We need a camera.
Cameras would be good, and also, I wonder if the signage would. Well, and the other thing is education. They need to be, they need to be told. I think you go to work out there and they don't say, these are the rules out on the highway as well as on site. We don't do those things, but that isn't part of the curriculum.
So TBD, but I'm thinking it may be worthwhile to at least look into this initial request of, people are still probably going to do what they want to do, but
And I'm not sure what that would look like, but it
you
is.
kind of described it, can you remember sort of how?
So, I mean, there were several options, but basically it's a barrier that separates the lanes, the east-west lanes. It just comes out, and it can be concrete, but if you didn't want to do that, because the trucks come around there too fast. So we're thinking just like rubber cones or rubber cylinders.
Whose idea was it?
Block-ups. That can just be put in there so that people would physically not be able to drive into the other lane and go around the arcs.
Well, that's something to talk to Judy about, because then when we're grading or snow plowing, or is that going to be an issue? Is there a wider path for
It would be
snow
something that would
plow?
have to be periodically replaced.
Oh, well, yeah, because Walsh has been on the road.
Yeah.
I think what they're talking about here is the road, you got your 2 lanes,
Right.
your gates across, and people are going like
Right,
driving through there, so if you put up barriers here
Right, yeah.
that are breakaway,
right.
that then once they're pulled up, they can't swing around.
So I thought I would raise it. It was in one or the other of yours. Just kind of crossover between the two of your assignments. So anyway, but just something to kind of flag and maybe see if this is something that,
If it's a solution.
Yeah.
And I can talk to Dewey and ask him what your base thoughts, what his thoughts are about that, right?
yeah, that would be great, actually. So, and I think that's it in terms of court reports. So
And I can also take it to citizens advisory.
Yes.
that'd be great. So it is just almost a quarter after 12. Let's do we have any announcements that we wanted to kind of get out of the way? And maybe we'll just break for lunch and come back in to
Got,
session hearing.
April 3rd, Budget Committee meeting, 8 a.m. courthouse, followed by county court meeting at 1 p.m. at the Emergency Services Building, because there's a circuit court case in the courtroom. April 4th, listening session on the juvenile services stuff. Here, 6 p.m. To be determined, a listening session in Condon. The following April 10th is the second budget committee meeting, again starting at 8 a.m.
And then possibly the 11th.
Possibly the 11th if necessary. And
And then the 17th, the tour of the SWCD building, and then our court meeting at 3. And-
Tri-County Court on the 24th, April 24th.
in Sherman County. And then we'll figure out a time to reschedule the 17th listening session, so that Amy can attend. So, okay, let's go ahead and recess the meeting. We'll come back in at 1:05 to do the public hearing for the weed assessment, and then then we'll hear the quarterly report from waste management and then wrap. 1:05, and so we will come back into session on a regular meeting and go right into the public hearing to receive comment on the fiscal year 2019-2020 Gilliam County Weed Control Special Assessment. This is the time duly set and advertised for a public hearing on the matter of the Gilliam County Weed Control Special Assessment for fiscal year 2019-2020. The rate for the 2019-2020 year has been proposed at 7 cents per acre. Hearings are conducted in accordance with ORS 569.175 through 569.620. This hearing is for the purpose of gathering evidence as to the need for, identifying who will benefit from, and to take input on the special weed assessment rate. This is a legislative hearing. All those in attendance that wish to testify are asked to sign in at the attendance sheet here, and the hearing is now open. We will start with the staff report.
Me?
That's you, I guess. Do you have anything to add or tell us?
Normally I don't say anything, I'm just there to ask questions.
Okay.
For anybody that might have questions, what it may be used for, if you want to know. If you have a problem with the way it's being used, we'll listen to that. I have a couple folks that talked to me a week or so ago that I'm actually going to go out and look at the place after I get out of here and see what their problem is with some new land that they just purchased. But other than that, I'm just here to answer questions for the folks that might have came in.
Okay. Are there any questions for weed control officer? Les? None? Okay. We move into public testimony. Is there anybody, there's nobody signed up, is there anybody that didn't have a chance to sign in that might want to testify?
Okay. I'm not gonna pass up this.
You can't help yourself, Les. Come on up.
I want to put something on the record here for this to some extent. Let's work at Rock Creek. And I'd like to take this opportunity to compliment the weed department and more or less our weed master. And more particularly the need for that program and the fortunate opportunity that we have to utilize the dollars involved. And I just think it needs to be stated on the record that Gilliam County is fortunate to have both the district and the assessment and what it's being used for.
Okay. Les, while you've got, would you mind just filling that out so we've got everything written down, and I assume Sandy needs that just
Yes,
for
thank you.
record keeping. Anybody else that wants to add anything on public testimony? If not, I'm going to go ahead and recess the hearing. The hearing is hereby recessed. This hearing will be continued to Wednesday, April 3rd at 1:05 p.m. at the Emergency Services Building in Condon, Oregon. To be continued. Okay.
I'll go out and check and let you know though.
All right, thank you.
All right. That one, how
Yes.
Okay.
The next one will be more complicated. We'll have to do the first reading and all that.
Oh, goody.
Something.
You guys are gonna have scripts then.
I'll
We
get
get to
scripts.
play.
You'll
Get
have
excited.
scripts.
We get to play.
Costumes are your own.
Please don't dress up. Okay, let's go right into the management. Waste management quarterly report. Please, correct. Thank you. Thank you. Mrs.
This is our full year 2018. We were trying to get on the docket earlier, but there was a new court, and then we tried to get together, and that took a while. We apologize for it being March before actually in the docket, but we'll be back in probably about 8 weeks and do the first quarter and maybe the fourth month of the year, and then get back in the stream things. Usually this should have happened in early February. Q4 2018. 2018 was a good year at Columbia Ridge, not great. We were up in the quarter by 14% on our tonnage, but down for the year roughly 4%. Primarily soil volumes, the material that comes in the gondolas. And then of course the host fees paid for the year. And then chem waste was actually down quite a bit in the quarter and on the year. We were 44% in the quarter and then 18% in the year. Rough year for chemical waste management. Site safety updates, and I guess, so part of this is actually current, so the numbers are historical, the current is sort of low. But safety, we did have an accident recently. A mechanic was working on a piece of equipment, decided to exercise that equipment. The material in the equipment was frozen and it actually flopped the truck on inside. Got it back up. There were no injuries, but it was relatively serious. Hiring, Columbia Ridge and Chem Waste. We've got multiple positions open, lab techs and chemists, primarily at Chem Waste, operator, laborers, and administrative personnel. That's a fairly common theme. We continue to have positions open on a regular basis. Construction projects at Columbia Ridge. We'll be doing some gas wells this year and adding a third flare at the site to take care of the landfill gas in the event the engine plant goes down. Employee and community engagement. We've had a great first couple of months of the year. Actually, I can say 2.5 months. We've had no serious injuries or accidents. So we're looking to schedule a safety barbecue in the next couple of weeks. Now if the weather's better, we'll have get together for the folks. We did start a new newsletter, and one of our former employees, I was cleaning out some paperwork, and I saw that she had used to write a newsletter in Wall Spears, and so I thought that's a great idea. So we did start a newsletter. We rolled out our first copy last week. I think it was well received. Just it's really, what's going on at the two sites. I think one of the things we've heard over time is we want to know what's going on, and so this is an effort to educate folks and give them insight. So it was a great idea, and I filtered that from her.
The issue is keeping it going and getting your managers to engage in it and keep submitting information. There's your challenge. That's why it died.
I appreciate that. As I was putting it together, just getting people to participate is not easy.
Yeah.
But it is a really good tool.
In a lot of ways, I knew most of the stuff, so it was kind of easy to put it together the first time. And it's like, all right, so how frequently? And we've got to get people involved. We do have a new site safety manager, a fellow named Mark Frisco, on the team, and he's got a lot of good ideas, and I think he's going to help push information out and get people involved. Of course, Leah does a great job with it, and I think we're going to keep it going. I'm not committing to a monthly because I'm not sure.
That's a little too often.
It's a tiptoe into it, I think. Were you doing it quarterly?
I think we tried to do it monthly and then we switched to quarterly because there was more to say for the managers to report on quarterly.
I think it kind of depends on what's going on.
It
You have a
does.
lot of things coming up in New
During the summer, it's easier.
We're gonna have, okay, I'm thinking of.
Yes.
We already discussed that.
Make it a requirement.
If we got 6 out this year, that would be a pretty good
Yes.
number. Every other month, so every 6 or 8 weeks, and hopefully educate people and get them feeling comfortable about what's going on.
Well, we're engaged in all the things that happen.
Yeah, and there's less rumor and innuendo.
Yes.
It's more, here's what we know.
Right, exactly.
We'll go from there. So it was a great idea, and thank you. I appreciate that. Tonnage. So for the 2019, Columbia Ridge started off really strong. We were up 9% in January. I think, as everyone knows, February was a tough month for a lot of reasons, but Walsh was down, probably 15%, 20% of the volumes coming out of Metro did not make it here because of weather, so they were taken to other landfills. I have full confidence we're going to catch up. It was just, nothing we can do, really. Ken Weiss is starting off the year strong, and we're very positive on that. And then the last thing I wanted to touch base on was the cap and trade. I know Jackie and the government affairs team reached out to everyone and asked you to participate. There's some details in here. Jackie said you're more than welcome to reach out to her if you wish to talk in further detail. But the legislature is considering a cap and trade scenario whereby you're, as an entity, you're allotted a certain amount of emissions. And if you're planning to go over that, then there are penalties and you have to buy credits and so forth. The state of Washington and the state of California both have these in place. Landfills, because of the complex nature of measuring any sort of emissions, is in Washington and California, they're out of the normal cap and trade focus. They participate, but on a lesser basis. And I think that's ultimately where we'd like to be in Oregon. Just from an economic perspective, it makes more sense. And I know several folks did come down and speak in the Dalles on the March 1st hearing, and we appreciate that. I actually think they were well received, and I'll forget who it was, but Jackie had said they understood and said, hey, let's set this aside and go back and talk about landfills again. Let's make sure we understand what we're doing. So I think ultimately it was a positive outcome, and just wanted to help you guys know, or give you what we know about the whole process. Jackie obviously can give you a whole lot more. But that's sort of the waste management update. Do you have any questions?
Leslie actually had some questions, and she was in a hurry to go on vacation. I forgot to leave them for me, but I'll see if I can remember what they were. I think she's been hearing a lot of people ask about, there was something said about the diversion for the issues at the railroad crossing. If there have been some solutions to some of those issues?
So Michael Goss came and talked to me a couple of weeks ago now, and I think he had met with you, and I believe we're going to put up dividers at the intersections, which gave him confidence that he could pull out of the intersection without having employees, or not employees, without having people try to circumvent the train gates. And ultimately, I think it is a safety issue. He doesn't want to have somebody trying to squeak through while they're changing the direction of the train. I do think most of what I heard coming out of the issue was during the cold weather months, which the train just struggles more during those months, whether it's ice on the tracks or what have you. But I think, at least initially, we're planning to try the county's planning to do the dividers. And I think Michael believes those will work. Two other options that we've talked about internally was having flaggers during peak hours. So if we still see people running around the gates, we would put flaggers up. Waste management would have a flagger out there to prevent that, which I think would help the process. Not going to be perfect, but I think it would help. The other thing we have talked about, at least for the employees and potentially for the folks that live out in the areas, doing a little alternate design road across the facility so we could actually avoid a train. That would, for folks that live out Cedar Springs, we would have to escort them. For the employees, we'd just educate them on where the road is. So those were some of the solutions that were coming up before Judge and Waco got together. So, this has been an ongoing thing. We've brought it up with Waco in the past, and their concern was the safety thing. I think they started hearing it from more than just us, and I think that helped move to a solution or help them get more excited about a solution.
The other thing on our list, and I'm not sure this is a waste management problem, but a Walsh truck issue, is that she's heard complaints about the trucks speeding through town. They're not slowing down and observing the speed limits, but I'm sure that's something you can control in this.
I can certainly mention it to the Walsh folks.
Would you also mention that truck? You know what truck I'm talking about, don't you? I'm sure you see it out there on the freeway, the one that blows the blue smoke for about 3 miles.
That's all.
Actually, that.
Well, there's one that's horrible. There's one that's just.
We saw it this morning.
Yes.
I can
It's-
actually, if I'm driving down 84, I'll actually smell it. I know
Oh, yeah.
there's a Walsh truck in front of me.
It's a regen process that those engines are going through, part of that's what's causing that.
Well, that one's been running for a couple of years now.
No, it's,
They don't seem to be doing.
they have in some vehicles they use urea, but they'll spray them into the exhaust to clean out any particulate. And I don't know what style they use, but I think that's every truck they run.
Well, there's one in particular.
It's exceptionally,
It smells.
I smell it from time to time, and I know I'm about to come up on a Walsh truck. I've never seen any other truck do that.
I've never noticed but this one, and I can't, every time I look at it, I want to get the number, and I've never been able to get the number, but I could also call.
I'll touch base with Bernie and those guys and just say, hey, little reminder.
Who is the contact at Walsh?
Bernie's running the interference with the landfill.
Who's Bernie?
And Bernie's one of the brothers, I don't know how to describe it. Yeah.
Is he the one that was the accountant?
I don't think so. I think he had a different operations role. He was doing sawdust for a number of years, and I think he's only back in with Walsh in the last couple of years, or back at, their headquarters in Toronto.
Okay, thank you.
They're Bob and Bernie, and
Right.
Bernie's the one I deal with most of the time.
Any other questions, Sherry?
I don't think so. I think she had something else, but I can't remember what it was. She wrote a list. I will get it from her and I agree to CSC.
She sent me an email and said that you were gonna take her spot on the CAC.
She had to take some other roles, some passes and things around, so.
I don't have any questions. This is great.
May I ask a quick question? Just because this came up in a meeting I was in last night, is the engine plant running and producing energy, or?
The waste energy plant?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If it's not running, then somebody failed to
Okay.
report it.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, and somebody else thought it wasn't.
Last week, they were replacing an engine, but it's just one engine.
Okay.
That's
So they'll typically stay running,
Yeah.
but for one particular engine if they're doing a rebuild. And those happen once a year, effectively, each of their engines will go through a rebuild cycle, so.
This was an engine swap that they were doing from the last week, I believe, but typically there's 8 engines running.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's actually 12.
You're right. This time you're right.
Yeah, don't get used to that.
I'm surprised she would have did it.
Thank you guys for your time to overcome. This is great. Okay. To 6.3. Only thing we have left is the next meeting, which will be April 3rd at 1 o'clock. Again, this will be held in the Emergency Services Building in Condon, so do not go to the courthouse or you'll end up in a circuit court meeting rather than a county court meeting.
Recruited onto the jury, so don't do it.
Don't do it. Anything for the good of the revolution? I don't think so. Okay, then we will adjourn this meeting at 1:24. Thank you very much.